On the next edition of Painting and Travel, we're going to meet Roosevelt and Rufus. Roosevelt gives Sarah a tour of historic downtown St. Augustine, Florida, while Roger paints Rufus, the carriage horse.
This is Rufus. Rufus is a carriage horse here in our beautiful hometown of St. Augustine, Florida. I'm going to do an 11 by 14 inch painting of Rufus. While I set up, we'll meet Roosevelt, who is Rufus's driver.
This is Roosevelt Upshaw, and we're standing inside the stables of the carriage house. And how many years have you been operating a carriage?
Over 25.
Over 25?
Yes.
All right here in St. Augustine?
Right here.
So you know a lot about what goes on in the city.
A little bit.
Yeah, some you can say, some you can't.
Hey.
And how did you learn about horses?
I learned about horses many years ago. There used to be a stable around on DeSoto Street, and I used to go from the house around there when I was a little boy. And I was afraid of the horses at first because Ambrose Cooley used to come in the morning times. He'll come and water them. He'll let them out the stall, and they'll run over to the watering trough, drink the water, then they'll go back, roll, jump up, and run back in the stall. But when they run out to the watering trough, I used to hide. There was a palm tree over there. I used to hide behind the palm tree because I was scared of them. And so eventually one morning I went in there and I started watering them. I would let them out. They would run to the watering trough. And when they start running around in the yard, I would hide behind the door. And when they go back in the stall, I lock the door and go to the next one. But some of them, it was a long time before they would go back in the stall. So I kept watering them. I watered all of them. Then he came and I told him, Mr. Cool, I watered the horses. He said, boy, I told you not to go in that yard. But it was over then. He'll give me a quarter. I'll go around the street, buy me a soda water and some cookies, and I was happy.
Well, so you built a relationship with the horses just gradually.
Yeah.
So you got comfortable with them and they got comfortable with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you created a job for yourself.
Yeah.
So you're an entrepreneur?
Yeah, you might say.
Yeah, at age, what was that?
I was about 8.
About 8 years old.
Yeah, a little boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course that's when a quarter could get you the drink and the cookies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember those days for sure.
A top cola, a RC, coconut cookies were about that long. Now they like that.
Now, what is your day like here? You come over at what time?
I come in the morning about 7:15. I feed them. I get Rufus. I clean him up, put the harness on him, pull my buggy out, hook him up, and go downtown. And
you have the one horse, Rufus.
That's
your particular animal that you care for?
Yeah. I care for all of them in the mornings. I feed all of them. But he's the one that I mostly spend most of my time with.
Mm-hmm. And so then you hook him up to your carriage and you head downtown?
Yes.
Do you wear anything special when you're on duty?
Yeah.
Let me see.
My hat. This is one of a kind. My hat. I have the company uniform, which is a white shirt with the logo on it, and black pants. And my hat.
Let's take a look.
Right there. That's it.
That's how I've seen you the most, downtown, with your hat on and your profile, and I've always thought, gee, I'd just love to talk to him.
Well, St. Augustine is just a wonderful town, and the carriages are really a special part of this community. I've always loved seeing the carriages drive around this old city of St. Augustine. I'm using an 11 by 14 inch board today, masonite board. It's toned with a bit of burnt sienna. I'm using acrylics. This is titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and cerulean blue for my colors. I don't think I'll need any other colors, but I might put in a warm color later on, maybe a bright red. I'm not sure. I'm just going to make my drawing here with some acrylics. It's ultramarine blue and burnt sienna makes just a nice dark color just to sketch this. Instead of sketching in charcoal, it's not that complicated a subject, but the horse will be moving, so I have to draw this fairly quickly. And Randy's gonna hold Rufus for me, so maybe Rufus will cooperate with the help of Randy. I remember when I was a young boy, I had books on how to draw cartoons, and that simple book always helped me even today, because I remember it taught me about basic shapes, triangles, squares, and circles. So when I look at Rufus here, what I'm seeing is a big circle right in here, and then we got his jaw there. Of course, we have a square for the blinders, and I doubt if I'll get my drawing terribly accurate because Rufus is moving all the time, but I'll do my best here. And what I want to get out of this is just a feeling about what this animal is. So part of the experience of doing a good painting is really experiencing the subject firsthand. So that bridle comes right around here and goes right under his chin. What I'm trying to do is look at these basic shapes, like this part of the bridle and this part of the bridle. It leaves me a triangular shape right here. So that's what I'm trying to key in on, is those little shapes that will make this drawing as accurate as possible. I have a little curve right on the nose there. Well, I think that's the basic outline. Now I'll grab a large brush and we'll just block in some big shapes and big colors. Burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. I'll take all my earth colors here, the yellow ochre, the burnt umber, and burnt sienna. Just mix those all together. I don't know who's going to last longer out here in the sun, me or Rufus. It's pretty hot out here today. Now I'll take some of this darker color, the burnt umber and ultramarine blue, and put his mane up here. I hear one of the carriages coming down the street now. That gets Rufus's interest here, doesn't it? Down here by his mouth, it gets a lot grayer. I haven't used any white in my paintings so far. I probably won't use any for a little while until I get these values placed more accurately. We've got some sun hitting Rufus right under here, and it casts a nice shadow from his bridle. He put the other part of his bridle in right here below his ear, and then it comes right around here above his head. Now I'm starting to put in just a few touches of lighter tones. So until this point, I used all transparent colors. Now I'm starting to add some white. Of course, the yellow ochre has white in it, so that's not a transparent color. I should maybe say dark colors. We'll make this a cooler color down here. We'll mix ultramarine blue and burnt umber, but we'll put mostly ultramarine blue in that to keep this cool, because we have so many warm colors all in here that I think a cooler color makes a little bit nicer picture of things. The background on this painting, as you can see, there's just some shrubbery, trees, building, and of course this beautiful carriage. But I want to feature Rufus, so all I'm going to do is put in a tone of color. And I think to keep this painting warm, we'll make some white, yellow ochre, cerulean blue. And it's cooler than Rufus, but we'll try that, and we'll just get rid of this very warm tone here and put in a cooler color, because I think this warm tone is really affecting how I'm looking at these colors here. And again, I'm not trying to make a finished piece of this at all right here in the field. We'll do that back in the studio. I want to get my values right as best I can with Rufus moving around. There, I think by making this sort of a neutral background in here, I want to keep these colors about middle tone or maybe a little bit darker because I want to catch some highlights coming across Rufus's front part of his head here. So that's why I want to keep this somewhat dark up here. I think when I get back into the studio, I'll work on this background and flatten it out quite a bit. The sun's coming from over my shoulder here. So that puts some nice highlights right on the front of Rufus's face, right in here. I'm going to just spray this because that's dry already. This is a new brush, so it has a nice chisel point on it, and that will let me put a nice sharp edge right on Rufus's head here, right on his nose. This really is quite a challenge to paint such a moving object. What I'm trying to do now is locate where these buckles are, get them in the right place. My Rufus's ears keep turning different ways, don't they? It's very important that I get the edge of the form here accurate, because what describes that stiff hair up there is the edge of the form. It's not the areas down in here. It's this edge right up in here. Here we have a darker area right behind his jaw, right here. Makes a nice triangular shape. Now with some yellow ochre and burnt sienna, a touch of white will work on this area right above his head, right in his nose here. And then it all goes gray down here. Now right down here, his beard gets really kind of old looking. Rufus is about 10 years old, I think. He's been carrying tourists around St. Augustine for many years. And everybody knows Roosevelt and Rufus here in town. And we have a nice highlight coming across the front of that blinder. Look at this little diamond right in the middle there. Well, I think I'm going to finish this painting back in the studio. I really want to thank Randy for keeping Rufus in one place as best he could, but I think Rufus is anxious to get back out on the road and bring some more tourists around this historic district. So I think I'll wrap it up for now and we'll meet back in the studio. Well, here we are back in the studio. I've taken the drawings of Rufus that I did on location and I've changed my painting somewhat just to get a more accurate outline of Rufus, because he was moving so much during the time I was painting him, and I've done a few of those corrections here. So with having those done, I'm going to work on finishing and putting some details in this. I have the same palette here that I used out on location. I use a glass palette, and underneath I have a gray piece of paper. This is a middle tone gray. That way when I mix my colors, I can see whether they're above middle tone or below middle tone. So I prefer that to having a wooden palette that is sort of a warm wooden color. This gives me a nice neutral tone, and I can compare my values and tones much easier with this gray underneath the glass. So in addition to using my sketches, I also have a photograph here on my computer monitor, which sits just to my right. So with those two good references, I think I can finish this quite easily. Right down here in this area seems to be very cool as compared with the rest of his fur up in here. This is where he's showing a little age, I think. Our little dog Silver started to get gray in this area as well. I think all animals do. There's not a lot of color here in the horse. Right in here, there's right above this gray area that seems to be a warmer patch of color. So I'm taking my burnt sienna and some yellow ochre, make that somewhat warmer right here. Right now this painting has a very thin wash of color on it, so I'm going to use more heavier colors, more opaque colors to fill all these areas in. I don't want it to look like a watercolor. This really won't look like a watercolor painting because it's not on watercolor paper, but if paint is applied too thin, to a painting on board or canvas, it just looks like there wasn't much dedication or very much confidence put into a painting. So these colors and these values and tones all need to be a little more opaque, a little thicker paint. Putting some bluish colors in here just to break it up from all these warm colors. And in the shadows, these are going to be much cooler because they're getting reflection and light from the sky. So it's these areas in here, I'm going to make them cool shadows. Ultramarine blue and burnt umber is going to make my darkest color with the paints I have on my palette. And I'll go over these blinders again. Darker colors can have less pigment applied to the board, and I'll be okay. But my lighter areas, they need to be much heavier with pigment. So the lighter areas, I'm going to use more pigment probably than the darker areas. In a light area, I'm able to see more texture in real life. I'm able to see more things when it's well lit. In dark areas, you can't see so much detail or texture, so it applies over into the painting as well. I think I'll work on this background now because really there's just too much texture up here. It was very quickly put on, and I need to make that a more pleasing background, maybe something solid. So I'll take a larger brush for that. Again, I'll use the same colors I did in the field, cerulean blue and burnt sienna and white. And I'll spray my board so my colors can flow over it quickly and easily. And the reason I want this flatter and with not so much texture going on is because I want any texture that exists to show up as the fur of this horse. I don't want the texture competing with it here in the background. The secret to putting on these background colors quickly and to keep them all flat is to keep enough paint on my paintbrush, load the paintbrush up, and then I apply it and I go back and forth every which way, just like a house painter might, just to smooth out the paint. So I go this way, and that smooths it out. Then as a last step in smoothing this out, I can just go over it with a light touch, just very gently, and smooth everything. I'm going to continue with some lighter patches up towards his nose here, where I think some of the sunlight was hitting it. I'm using a flat brush instead of a small pointed brush because I want to get enough paint on that, and if I use a small pointed brush it would be hard to blend this side of it. Many times I use a palette of just red, yellow, and blue, but in this case I've used my blues and my earth colors because it's really the colors I see in the painting, and many times my palette is determined by just visually looking at my subject and determining what colors I think I might use. And often that ends up just being 3 primary colors of red, yellow, and blue. And that will always work, but I have so many browns and warm tones in here, I thought the earth colors would work better. And then of course I have the blues to make them cool, cut those down and make them cool. When Sarah and I were in Amish country in Indiana, I painted several of the horses in that area. They were magnificent horses, big work horses, Belgian work horses I believe they were. Right up top, his head starts to bend around a little bit, and just with the side of my brush like this, I'm going to put in some highlight areas that were, some of the light is reflecting off his fur from the sun. Now right here on his mane, where all that fur is sticking up, I'm taking an older brush where the hairs are a bit separated and it's a little stiff, and I think that's a good choice to flip this fur upward. I'm picking up a small number 2 pointed brush and we'll add a few small whiskers right underneath. It doesn't take too many small details like this to get the point across. And often I've done a painting where people think that I've put in lots and lots of detail, where the fact is that very little detail was put in, but it was put in the right place. So when people looked at it, they thought there was more detail than actually existed. I'll be switching brushes pretty frequently now between these details. This is always the fun time of a painting, is when the details are added, but I have to be sure that I have all the basic foundations of the painting done before I jump in to work on the details. We'll move up into this area now. I think with just a few strokes will be all I need to indicate that the hair coming over there. Once again, my small pointed brush, and the light is catching this blinder right on the edge of this leather blinder. Taking cerulean blue, just a touch of burnt sienna, and I'm going to make this area look like it has a little bit of reflected light on it. This is so nice. This is all dry now, because with oils it would be totally different, but this was dry underneath, so I can put my acrylics on top of that and not have to worry about my colors getting muddy. There's some stitching that goes right along here, so putting those little tiny stitches on this side here, we have a nice cool area. So ultramarine blue and white, make that very cool. Need to be sure that's very round. And in the center, I'll pick up yellow, ochre, and white. We'll make this a warm color because the sun is hitting that. And then on this edge right here, we'll put a highlight of pure white, and maybe one right on the opposite side, small one, small little highlight right there. There's stitching on these straps, so this, I'm not going to show every little stitch, but this will help me outline and define where those straps are. This strap here is catching a little bit of a light in a little different way, so we'll make this cool. Have another belt buckle here. I put that in earlier, but it's sort of got covered over, so we'll place that in there again. Pure white, touch of highlight right on the edge. Now I'll move back down to this area and again take my white. I'm mixing it this time with a slight amount of yellow ochre to give it a warm color. Then another touch of pure white for a highlight right in here. And that highlight glistens, so I'm going to make it slightly larger than this ring because it's just shining and it's glistening. So by making that larger, you'll indicate that that's shining. Now I don't see a very bright highlight on the edge here of his nose, but I'm going to push that up and make it lighter. So this is dry. I'll spray that. And I did start out by making that lighter, but we'll really put a nice bright highlight right on the edge of his nose, and maybe pick up a few of those areas on the hair above it. Pointed brush, just a tiny highlight right there. Since there's a highlight right here on the edge, probably would stand to reason there would be some of that light catching his fur up here, catching his hair up here. So we'll add that. That will tie those two areas together. Well, it was really great getting to know Roosevelt and Rufus. I think I'm pretty much finished with this painting now. I'm going to add a few more details, and then we'll take one last final look.
Roosevelt has Rufus harnessed to the carriage, and we get to tag along downtown to where his day begins as a carriage driver. So we leave the stable for the day.
Yeah.
How long will you be gone?
Till about 2:30, 3 o'clock. Most of the time I get out about 8:30. Now right here was the hotels, which were the Arkansas was to the right, 1888. The Cordova in the front, the Ponce de Leon was to the left. It's now called Flagler's College. It's now a 4-year college of liberal arts. When it was open as a hotel, it was only open a few months out of the winter. Never in the summer on account of the climate. It's too hot. And at that time, some parts of the building was not air conditioned.
I wonder how many miles you and Rufus cover on the average day.
The tour is about 2.5 miles. If he do 3 trips, that's about 6-8 miles a day. Because most of the time, if he's standing up on the stand, he be sleeping.
So he can rest in between.
Yeah.
He's feeling good now. He feels like he's on course.
See, what I normally do here, I'll pull up a little bit and I'll give him some water. Most of every morning, this way I stop, right here. Whoa, see, he knows.
Yes, he does know.
Now watch him, he's gonna take another step, see? You always have to take that last step.
Why is that?
He's that's just what he do.
Is it like having the last word?
Now we'll get him some water. See, he drinks from the hose. A lot of them can't do it.
As it turns out, this is Roosevelt's day off. He was just kind enough to give us a special tour so we could film. And we thought we'd be walking back to the stable, but he's giving us a ride back since he's headed there anyway. So we get an extra ride.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.